Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this session on sustainable football facilities. It's good to see you all coming here. And I would say this session is about finding the right balance, and I will explain more about that in a minute. And probably the gender balance of this place not exactly as it should be, but we'll forgive Soccerex about that. But I think we have to compliment them for putting together such an excellent panel, because if I start over there, Nicolas Evans is for FIFA in charge of researching and setting the industry standards at FIFA. So looks at it from an international point of view. And then we have Stuart here with us from AFC. He connects the dots and leading the development activities across Asia with all the 47 member federations that they have. And Mark Scutcliffe here next to me is making it happen in Hong Kong at a national level. So we have an international, continental, and national perspective on the topic, which I think is quite unique. So I won't go in through the biographies of all the individual speakers you on the website, but I just want to thank them for being here with us, this panel. Sustainable football facilities is the topic, but what are we talking about? It's a hot topic these days. It's also very much a container term that's used for many different things. And even among us, we're talking about taking it from one angle or the other angle. I myself work for the AISTS in Lausanne, International Academy of Sport Science and Technology. And we work with many different sport organizations on implementing sustainability strategies with large organizations, but also with smaller ones. Next week, I'm in Germany with the Canoeing Federation to help them for one of their. But the question that comes back all the time is like, what does it mean to be a facility? What does it mean to be a sustainable facility? Way, I think my mic is a bit on and off, so. No problem, we do it like this. So I was saying the question that we get all the time, what does it mean to be a sustainable sport facility? What does it mean to be a sustainable sport? And probably some of you also here are wondering, actually, what are we talking about? So I'm from an academic institution, so allow me just a 2-minute introduction to the theme before we get into the discussion. And probably the easiest way to explain this is with an example from another sport, a triathlon. They use often the example triathlon is swimming, running, and cycling. And in order to win a triathlon, you have to be good at all three disciplines. Or think it about as a 3-legged stool. If you take away one of those legs, it's going to be very difficult to sit on it. And the 3 disciplines of sustainability are people, planet, profit. That's probably the easy version. You have to be good in all 3 to run sustainable football facilities. People, you cannot play football without people. New facilities to allow more people playing the sport or encouraging people of all ages or abilities to play the sport. Planet, you need to have a healthy community. You need to pay attention to the ecological side of things. And then thirdly, profit, you need to keep the wheel turning. So you need to pay attention to the profit. So if you think about sustainability as this triathlon or the 3-legged stool, if you only focus on the ecological side of things, you ignore the profit, you'll be in trouble very soon. And if you only focus on your profit, but you might run out of people that actually want to play your sport. So in this panel, we'll not look too much into the ecological side of things, the planet side, but we'll really focus on how development strategies of football clubs can be used to promote grassroots development, and that they have facilities that are accessible to all people of all ages and all abilities, and to encourage a healthier lifestyle. So really the planet side is something that we put slightly more to the side for this session, and the people and the profit side of sustainable football facilities is what we'd like to discuss. So far my short introduction as an academy. Now let's talk about the real meat. And Mark, I probably want to start with you with a first question, because you told me about initiatives that you undertook in Hong Kong to overcome the problems of having little access to facilities. What sort of problems are we talking about, and how did you overcome them to make sure that people have actually access to facilities?
Sure. Okay, just check that my mic is working. Yeah, seems to be good. Okay, I think everybody in this room will have a perception of Hong Kong and as an area which is very densely populated and with property prices higher than anywhere else in the world, and that is actually the facts of the matter. So any flat area of land in Hong Kong is usually developed for housing or similar commercial developments, which basically means that, from our perspective, we have 75 11-a-side football pitches in the whole of Hong Kong. That's for a population of 7.5 million people. So one pitch for every 100,000 people. Not all of those pitches are full size. Because there's only 75, they're very heavily used. We have also climatic challenges in Hong Kong. So it means that we have very little access to good quality facilities throughout the year. So if I compare that with where I'm from originally in England, where there's one pitch for every 2,500 people. So we have 40 times fewer pitches per head of population. And that creates real difficulties for everybody in Hong Kong in terms of accessing facilities. So at the moment, we, as a national association, we don't have our own facilities for our representative teams to play and train on. None of our clubs have their own stadium. We have to hire facilities from the government. Most of those are also available for community use. And that lack of facilities makes it difficult for us to develop players. Everybody wants to play football in Hong Kong, so we have to share the access to those facilities, which means that at the elite level, we don't really have enough facility availability to train players with the frequency and the intensity that we would want. So that always means when we're competing against other countries at either club level or international level, our players, they haven't had sufficient time with the ball to develop the techniques, the tactical awareness, the physical attributes, and the mental abilities that you need to compete. So we're trying to overcome that problem, and it's very difficult. It means we have to be very creative. So I think the link to the sustainability issue is that finally we identified a site in Hong Kong which was available because it was a former landfill site. So we're now developing our own training centre on basically 15 billion tons of household waste. Now, that land can't be used for building, so we managed to persuade the government to give us a 10-year license. We managed to persuade the Hong Kong Jockey Club, which is a charity, to give us the capital to build our own training centre. So it's going to open this June. We're very excited. We're going to have 6 new pitches. Now, that adds about 15% to the total volume of pitches in Hong Kong. There are 3 natural turf pitches and 3 artificial pitches. The 3 natural turf pitches we're going to retain for our own high-performance use or our national teams for high-level referee development and coach education. The artificial pitches will be used for our development programs, our young kids, our academy, and we're also going to make the facilities available for community use to try and address this disparity between supply and demand of football pitches in Hong Kong. So we're trying to find creative ways of kind of addressing the deficiency and to give us an opportunity to compete on a level playing field.
And when you have the facilities, do you have difficulties attracting the people actually come to the pitch?
No. There is actually a black market for football pitches in Hong Kong. So people queue up in the middle of the night to hire government pitches and then sell them on at an increased market value. It's probably one of the only places I know where there is a black market for football pitches. If you drive around Hong Kong in the middle of the night, you will find people playing football. So out of the 7.5 million people, we know that 300,000 males want to play football on a weekly basis. So massive demand means people end up playing on 5-a-side on basketball courts, on hard surfaces, everywhere. So we don't have problems selling it. Our problem with the new centre is going to be kind of containing the demand. People travel for a long time, although no distance is that far in Hong Kong, but there's a lot of other difficulties associated with travelling. So no, we're not worried about people using facilities. The problem that we're going to have in the future only 1% of females at the moment play. And obviously, as an association, we're trying to redress that balance as well. So if we get to a situation where 10% of the female population want to play on a weekly basis, we're going to have a real problem accommodating all of that demand.
Is there a specific way that you reach out to the women in Hong Kong to attract them to football?
Well, we're working on a strategy. It's only 5 years ago that the Ladies Football Association was assimilated into the Hong Kong FA. We've now appointed a women's football manager, a grassroots football manager, and a head coach. And we've introduced girls' leagues, a female league with the support of, again, our main partner, the Hong Kong Jockey Club. And we've got international squads at all the age groups. So girls and women's football, as it is in most places in the world, in Hong Kong is really taking off, and it's fantastic to see.
I'm talking to the situation in Hong Kong, Nicolas. I'm turning to you because you work at an international level in developing standards. To which extent can you develop an international standard for sustainable football facilities when you're talking Hong Kong, China, elsewhere in Asia compared to the rest of the world?
Evidently not easy. Does that work now? Yeah, well, it's evidently not easy. I mean, you've just got one very passionate story. We've got 210 others in the world. There are obviously a lot of countries in a similar rationale with lack of space, or specifically cities or municipalities. But then you have the complete opposite. You have a country like Iceland with 300,000 people. They have 10 elite indoor synthetic facilities, and I think that can help explain some of the success that they've had. But then you have countries like Germany, you have Western Europe, which are very developed in a lot of ways in facilities. But then that trickles down. You've got other realities in Europe that are climatically challenging. You have countries that go from plus 40 to minus 40 within a season. They need very different facilities than countries where it might not rain. In other countries, you'll have this youth issue. Specifically, one of the things that FIFA wants to move forward, as was said this morning, is to try and get 60% of the world population engaged in football. That obviously means trying to get more people to play. The way you do that is by having proper facilities, not least then to get more women involved in the game as well. And that requires long-term planning. That requires facilities that allow to be played on year-round, that allow all youth levels to play and develop properly, rather than ending up to play on clay courts, on sand courts, on surfaces that are not made for it. So I think it's really the call to try and improve the surfaces that people play on across 211 countries. So you can put out some guidelines, you can put some rough standards to say this is an absolute minimum that we would request, but then it's down to our confederations and members to sort of fine-tune that mix to their own reality.
And Stuart, if you work with 47, if I'm not mistaken, countries across Asia, which are very diverse in many ways, how do you implement standards? How do you actually make sure that they can benefit from these standards and they can grow the number of facilities in a sustainable way?
Okay. Well, in terms of standards, that's not necessarily our role. It's more what Nicolas is doing at FIFA. Sustainability is the focal point of everything we do at the AFC for our member associations. Whether we're doing something with our development programs in refereeing, technical, marketing, whatever it is, we are looking at how the member associations can become more self-sustainable and to grow. I'd say that infrastructure is one of the biggest challenges in Asia. That's an obvious statement. And for ourselves, we have quite a limited budget to help those 47 member associations. So we have to make sure that when we invest the money, there is a significant buy-in from the member associations themselves, so they take responsibility, and that they're constantly looking at the sustainability, so they're putting proper plans in place, etc. To do that, we have different kind of mechanisms. We have two main programs. One is the infrastructure fund, which is general infrastructure, can be for lights, for full-size pitches, whatever it might be. For that project, we insist that the member associations fund those projects with 25% of the overall cost, so they have the sense of responsibility. With the mini pitches, we take a different approach, because it's like the guys have touched on already. This is more about getting out into the regions, into the communities, making sure there's facilities for people to play in different locations, and there's small-sided games, all the benefits of that kind of thing. For those projects, we have one partner, and we did a tender, of course, back in 3 or 4 years ago, and we've worked with Limonta, who are a very high-quality, reliable partner, and helped us significantly to make sure these projects go well. So the philosophy there is we put the best possible pitches up, we build the best possible infrastructure with lights, so it can be 24/7, highest quality turf, best sub-base possible, with the nets and all the rest of it, so it's a full solution. And then we say to the member associations, right now, you have to make sure this is sustainable. We won't be replacing this for you. So what we've seen is that many of the member associations are actually going out there and generating income from these facilities. We recently did a survey, and I think it's about $300 per pitch per week, which is not a significant amount of money, perhaps, if you're from a Western country. But if you think about some of the countries we're dealing in, those member associations are 100% dependent on FIFA and AFC funds, so an extra $15,000, $20,000 a year from one pitch actually has quite a significant impact. The smarter MAs, I would say, have also really taken it out to the regions. And then we have one that's actually decided to build the pitches, 2 pitches per regional association. So like a state FA, county FA, depending on what country you're from, they have different names. But the regional associations, they build these 2 pitches for them, and then they say, right now you're self-sustainable. They're making around, I think it's $900 per week average from these pitches. And the main federation, the national federation, no longer has to subsidize these regional associations because they've put the initial investment in. That's how we kind of approach the sustainability topic.
And is there usually a time frame that you say, like, okay, we work with you over a certain number of years or a certain period in order to become financially self-sustainable?
Well, it's not, I mean, it's quite hard to put such a time frame on these things. We work first and foremost on the member association strategic plans, and we then focus on helping them achieve all the different goals within that strategic plan. We then, of course, look at the activities underlying that to help them fund these things. The marketing we have a massive scheme taking place over the next 12 months in terms of commercialization of all MA rights. And then, of course, things like the facilities where they can actually go and generate the money themselves. So we don't actually put a fixed time on it, but obviously we're working around the strategic plans, which tend to be 4 to 8 years. Fingers crossed, some of the member associations will achieve sustainability in that time.
Okay. And something that just intrigued me when you were talking about this, Mark, is that in Hong Kong you have 1 pitch for every 100,000 people. I think I heard FIFA saying earlier this morning that in China the objective is to go to 1.2 for every 10,000 people. What do you have any idea? I'm looking a little bit more to you, but what sort of common across Asia, or there's no commonality there? It's like different per country. Like in England, it's 1 for every 4,000 people.
I think it's probably less than that from the figures that I've been given. If I could just say that I think from a Football Association perspective, while I've got my colleagues here from AFC and FIFA, really want to thank them for the partnership that we have with them. So from a FIFA's perspective, setting the standards has been very helpful for us in developing our new facilities, because it's very easy to come up with a specification and to give that to the market and say that's the standard that we want the pitches to be built to. And then the FIFA consultants come in and inspect the work and accredit the facilities. So I think that's a great role that FIFA play. From the AFC's perspective, we're in the process of applying to the infrastructure fund to expand the facilities that we're planning at our new football training centre. So we've run out of money, the money that we got from the Jockey Club. So we're looking to supplement that with a grant from the AFC to help provide 2 mini pitches and some equipment to finish off the rest of the training centre. So I think this partnership between the member association level, the Confederation, and FIFA it does work very well. I know the Hong Kong government is looking at a facility strategy for all sports at the moment, and they've specified that their standard is 1 pitch for every 75,000 people. For me, that's just far too low. There's no way that we can develop good quality footballers with that amount of provision. But then you have to take into account our circumstances. There is a lack of space, there's a lack of land, and from the government's perspective, there's a lot of pressure on them to develop more housing and more affordable housing for socially disadvantaged people. So they're even thinking or talking now about building on the golf course which hosts the Hong Kong Open. It's been there for 130 years. So that's how acute the shortage of space is. So whilst I think we would like to see a standard much lower than that, I think we're not going to achieve that in Hong Kong. I think it will be very difficult for FIFA to try and implement a worldwide standard. You have to just base it on the local circumstances.
Anything to add from your side? Can you give some ideas, some benchmarks?
I think that, I mean, some of the numbers may be official, unofficial. I think that's always very hard. And I think it depends on what you consider a state-of-the-art facility. I think, again, even within Europe, you'll have 1, 2, maybe 3 stadiums in a country that would meet sort of UEFA continental requirements. So I think it's very hard to set a global benchmark, and the more important is the local strategy. I mean, if we're talking here, 70,000 new pitches in China, that's obviously, if they're state-of-the-art, if they're really at the top level and sustainable facilities, then that's obviously a massive number you're putting in. But yeah, I mean, the ratio will depend. I mean, England has a lot of pitches, but then in Europe already you've got countries that have significantly less. I don't think it's so much about the absolute number or the ratio. It's also about how far are you developing the sport? Do you have a need for further facilities? Can all the clubs that want to play the amount of hours they can, down to the girls' youth teams, which are probably normally the last ones to get access? So I think it's more that sort of demand. Rather than looking at absolute numbers, it will just simply depend on what other sports are in the country and what other sports are being played in what facilities. If you look at the US, for example.
Are you saying that England's underachieving at football?
I would never say something like that publicly.
Very diplomatic. I'm just looking into the room. We can continue talking over here, but we said before we would love to have also interaction with you. So if you have any questions that you would like to ask our panel, feel free to. There's a microphone there. If you can just announce yourself, please.
Hi, my name is Eric Kinlan. I'm a general manager of HG Sports Turf, a company based in Australia that designs and builds sports fields. This is a question for Mark, really. Everyone's probably acutely aware of the new development in Hong Kong at Kai Tak, the old airport. Do you think there's an opportunity missed to develop more community sports pitches in that precinct when the development goes ahead?
Okay, so those people are not aware. The old airport site at Kai Tak is being redeveloped for a sports hub. It's a government project. I think it's a 32 billion Hong Kong dollar project. It's a 50,000-seater main stadium, 10,000 indoor arena, and a 5,000-seat secondary community sports ground, and then some other facilities in a kind of parkland setting. It's quite a big site. It's a government-led project, so we're only involved kind of tangentially in that we will be a main user of, or one of the main users of that facility. From our perspective, I think we would like to see more community facilities. Obviously, we need a state-of-the-art stadium to replace the existing Hong Kong Stadium, which, although iconic in design and very atmospheric when it's full, is probably, well, it's definitely showing more of signs of wear and tear and age, and probably doesn't meet the international standard now to attract international clubs. So we definitely need a new stadium, but we'd also like to see that balance with additional community facilities to try and redress this balance between supply and demand. But at the same time, obviously that old airport site occupies a very prime location in the centre of Kowloon, and I can understand that with the investment of $32 billion, the government's going to want to expect to get some money back for more commercial development of offices, housing, etc. So everybody's trying to play this balancing act. From our perspective, we'd like to see more community facilities, more open space, more pitches that we can use for our grassroots programs. But at the same time, we have to balance this investment that the government's making.
is Ariana, and I'm with the Football Business Academy. But I have a question directed towards all of you, but mostly yourself, Mark. With trying to develop women's football in Hong Kong, are you guys really trying to develop it, or not as much? Because if you do get more women and girls involved, you just don't have the facilities to let them play. And with that, do you guys have extra locker rooms for the women and facilities for them to participate, or it's not really possible because there's no land?
Okay, as a matter of principle, my personal perspective, girls and women's football is just as important, equally important as boys and men's football. It is the fastest growing sport in the world. I believe that the benefits of playing football as an individual, in terms of health and well-being, and in terms of the contribution that football makes to society and communities generally, a more cohesive society. I think the investment and interest that has gone into girls and women's football in the past is scandalous. So within our strategic plan, girls and women's football, it has equal weighting. I'm not saying that everybody in football feels the same, but we are serious about growing it. I think anybody who is knowledgeable about Hong Kong football will see the investment that we're making in terms of the grassroots programs. I think historically, as was mentioned previously, when pitches are allocated at the start of the season, the girls and women's football get shunted to the worst pitches at the most inconvenient times, and we're trying to shift that balance. When we were designing the football training centre, we made sure that the changing rooms, etc., were unisex, and we will be promoting girls and women's football at the training centre. We've got a women's football manager who is quite high profile within the FIFA circles. She's doing a fantastic job, and long may that continue. I think in Hong Kong we got in our female coach who got into the Guinness Book of Records recently as the first female coach of a team to win a male professional football league. We have a female FIFA referee, and girls and women's football is blossoming in Hong Kong, and we're really proud of that fact.
Stuart, Nicolas, you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Hong Kong's one of the benchmark MAs for us when it comes to women's football. What the job they've done is fantastic. Obviously we cover all of Asia, which means that we, in some countries, have some major cultural challenges when it comes to women's football. So it's not just the old ideas that people have. We try our best to overcome some of them. For example, with our financial assistance program, we insist that 15% of the money, as a minimum, is spent on women's football. At one point, we even changed those regulations to make sure that wouldn't be for football equipment, because we realised that perhaps it wasn't necessarily going to women's teams. So we insisted it cannot be for football equipment. It has to be for coaches, for running a league, for hiring staff to manage women's football, that sort of thing. So that's one area. When it comes to the facilities, we are seeing an increase in the requests for facilities to be built for women's football, but we've seen that also for other areas as well. So disabilities football as well. Some of the mini pitches have been built specifically for disabilities football. But for women's football, for example, we've just had a request from Iran to build dormitories for their women's teams and their women's program. So we are seeing also, obviously, when we work on the strategic plans with the MAs, there's always a lot of attention given to the women's football side. The tough part is the implementation, but that's the same with every single area of the MA's activities. So we are seeing a more significant investment in women's football. Whether it's at the scale it should be is always going to be the question, and I'm with Mark on this one. It's an area that should be invested in much more significantly than it currently is.
You want to add, Nicolas?
Yeah. Just to add, I think what we can see is that some of the changes that were made with the new regime within Gianni Infantino, the now so-called 2.0 vision, some of the money that is given to the member associations, which used to be the financial assistance program, is dependent on certain structures being in place. So you will get a lump sum to sort of develop your MA, but then some of the additional payments will depend on having, for instance, youth teams, and some of them will depend on having a women's football team. So if you don't have any structures in place for a women's football team, you can then not unlock those funds. So it is an incentive in a way that's really trying to push this forward as part of the overall development. It's not an insignificant amount of that 1.25 million that requires there to be women's football in place in order for that money to be accessible. The one thing that we do have to say, where we want to promote it and push it, it does come down to a cultural point, so we can't really enforce it on a global level. You do have to have the subtleties of the continent, of the country itself, so that's more where we offer the incentive. And I think Hong Kong is a good example where we need a strong MA or strong FA that is actually asking to get these projects. So we can't either push every single of our members to say, right, you now have to do that, but you do somewhat rely on those members coming up with projects and proposals. So I think we're more than happy to support and in general, as we say, enable, but I think it's very hard for us to cross those boundaries and try and sort of push the MAs to do it, while we would obviously encourage them very much in line with what the other two have said.
Okay, I think I would like to thank all of you for contributing to the discussion. We can keep going for a while. We haven't tackled the issue of how to build a sustainable facility in its entirety, but one thing I think I take away from here is that we have this well-oiled machine, which is like national federation, continental and international, that works together well in the further development of football, and whether it's the 70,000 pitches in China, women's football in general, or many other topics. I think there's, like, to come back to the balance and the three-legged stool, there's a key component that they can and should work well together. So I would like to thank again our panel of today and all of you for being here in this session. And can I please ask you for a round of applause for our friends here?